A police officer was run off a mountain road and left to disappear in a blizzard, her crash meant to look like an accident. The man behind it believed the storm, the isolation, and silence would erase the truth. But deep in the Sawtooth Range, a Navy SEAL living off the map and his German Shepherd noticed something that didn't belong. What they uncovered would expose a hidden corruption and change every life it touched. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from, and if this story moves you, please subscribe for more. Winter came hard and early to Idaho's Sawtooth Range, pressing the mountains into a long season of ice and silence. Before dawn, the peaks stood like broken teeth against a pale blue sky, their shadows stretching down toward the valley where the small town of Stanley still slept. A few dim streetlights glowed through falling frost, and thin smoke rose from chimneys. Fragile signs of warmth before the wilderness reclaimed everything beyond the last plowed road. That boundary was where Nolan Cross lived. His cabin sat several miles outside town, tucked among dense pines on the lower slope of the range. It was not a retreat, and never had been. Built from thick timber and reinforced where it mattered, it had no decorative touches, no welcome mat, no marker on any map. Nolan preferred it that way. In his late 20s, tall and lean, he moved with a quiet efficiency shaped by years of discipline rather than comfort. His dark hair was cropped short, his face calm to the point of severity, as if emotion were something he rationed carefully. Beside him stood Bear. The German Shepherd was large, sable-coated, and powerfully built, his breath fogging the air in slow, steady rhythm. He did not wander or play in the snow. He watched, every sound, every shift in wind. Bear was not a pet, he was a partner, trained once for environments far harsher than this one. Even now, without a harness or command spoken aloud, he stayed close to Nolan's left side, alert and ready. Nolan was splitting a round of pine when Bear stiffened. The dog's ears snapped forward, his body going rigid. A low, controlled sound rolled from his chest. Not a bark, not a growl, but an unmistakable warning. Nolan froze, axe paused mid-swing, and followed Bear's gaze downslope toward the eastern face of the mountain. At first, he saw nothing. Then the wind shifted. A thin column of black smoke rose against the white landscape, twisting upward from somewhere near the base of the slope. It didn't belong there. Fires struggled to burn cleanly in this cold, and certainly not at this hour. "All right," Nolan said quietly. "Show me." Bear moved immediately, trotting ahead with purpose. Nolan set the axe aside, pulled on his outer shell, and followed. The descent was steep and unforgiving. Ice hid beneath fresh powder, turning each step into a careful negotiation with gravity. As they moved lower, the smell reached Nolan. Burned rubber, scorched metal. When the trees thinned, the source revealed itself. A police cruiser lay at the foot of the mountain, its front end crushed, the hood warped and blackened. Weak flames still flickered from the engine compartment, fed by residual heat rather than momentum. The vehicle had left the road at speed. There were no visible skid marks, no sign of braking. Nolan's jaw tightened. This did not look like a simple slide on ice. Bear barked sharply and bolted uphill. Nolan turned, scanning the slope above the wreck. That was when he heard it. A faint, broken sound, barely audible through the wind. A breath, a scrape of fabric against bark. Halfway up the slope, clinging to the mountainside, was a woman. She was tangled against a broken pine branch, one gloved hand wrapped around it with desperate strength. Her other arm hung close to her body, unmoving. Snow clung to her dark uniform, already stiffening with frost. Blood marked her temple in thin, frozen streaks, and one boot had lost all traction, sliding uselessly against ice-polished rock. Deputy Clara Hale. She was young, mid-20s, with a narrow face and dark hair pulled into a regulation knot that had come loose. Her breathing was shallow and uneven, each inhale visibly painful. Her eyes struggled to focus, drifting in and out as if the world refused to stay still. Bear planted himself downhill from her, bracing his weight into the slope and creating a living barrier between her and the drop below. "Don't move," Nolan called, keeping his voice steady. "I've got you." Her eyes flickered toward him. Fear, confusion, and relief crossed her face in quick succession. Nolan moved carefully. He anchored a rope around a nearby tree, clipped himself in, and eased closer. Years of training guided his hands. Quick assessments, controlled movements. He checked her ribs with gentle pressure. She gasped sharply, pain cutting through her breath. "Rib injury," he muttered. "Likely a hairline fracture or a severe contusion. Painful, but survivable if handled correctly." He shone a light briefly across her eyes. Her pupils reacted, though sluggishly. A mild concussion. Dangerous if ignored, manageable if monitored. Her skin was cold beneath his gloves, not frozen, but close enough to matter. Hypothermia. Mild to edging toward moderate. Working fast, Nolan looped the rope around her torso, distributing her weight away from the injured side. Bear shifted slightly, adjusting his stance to counterbalance them both. When Nolan eased her grip from the branch, she sagged immediately, her strength nearly gone. "Easy," Nolan said. "You're not falling." Her head lolled toward his shoulder. Her voice came out slurred, barely more than a breath. "Not accident?" "What?" Nolan asked. She swallowed hard, eyes unfocused. "They pushed the car." The words settled into the cold air between them. Nolan secured her fully before reaching for his phone. One bar of signal flickered, then vanished. He tried again, stepping higher, holding the phone overhead. Nothing. He switched to his radio, cycling through emergency channels. Static answered first, then a distorted voice cut through. "County rescue. Repeat." "I have an injured officer," Nolan said. "Female, vehicle off-road, coordinates." The signal broke. When it returned, the message was worse. "Storm front forming over the range. Air support grounded. No immediate extraction possible." Nolan closed his eyes briefly. Leaving her exposed on the slope was not an option. Keeping her here until help arrived, if it arrived at all, would kill her. He made the decision without ceremony. "All right," he said, giving Bear a subtle hand signal. The dog adjusted instantly, ready to move. Nolan wrapped Clara in an insulated emergency blanket from his pack, securing it tightly around her core. He positioned her upright against him, careful to minimize movement and keep pressure off her ribs. "Stay with me," he told her firmly. "Talk if you can. Don't go to sleep." She shivered, lips trembling. "Cold." "I know. We're moving." The climb back was slow and punishing. Nolan took each step deliberately, bearing her weight while keeping her stable. Bear moved ahead and behind, scanning constantly, adjusting position whenever the terrain threatened to give way. The cruiser below hissed as the last flames died, leaving only smoke and silence. The cabin emerged through the trees at last, dark against the snow. Inside, Nolan did only what was necessary, nothing more. He guided Clara to a spot away from drafts, replaced snow-soaked outer layers with dry insulation, and kept her upright. He spoke to her continuously, asking simple questions, keeping her conscious. He did not let her lie flat. He did not let her sleep. This was not treatment. It was containment, the bare minimum to keep her alive until proper help could reach them. Her eyes opened once more, glassy and unfocused. "It wasn't a crash," she whispered. "Someone wanted me dead?" Nolan met Bear's gaze across the room. The dog held his stare, unblinking. Whatever had happened on that mountain was not finished. And winter, Nolan knew, had only just begun. The cabin settled into silence once the door closed, a thick, insulating quiet broken only by the low crackle of the stove and the wind combing through the pines outside. Snow tapped softly against the walls, steady and patient. Inside, warmth began to reclaim the air inch by inch. Nolan moved without hurry, but nothing he did was slow. He knelt beside Clara Hale, his posture relaxed yet precise, the way men moved when their hands had learned urgency long ago. He stripped off his gloves, checking her skin temperature with the back of his fingers, before adjusting the blankets around her torso. Too much heat too fast would shock her system. Too little would let the cold finish what the mountain had started. "Stay with me," he said quietly. "If you feel sleepy, tell me first." Clara nodded faintly. Her face was pale, lips tinged blue at the edges, but her eyes were clearer now, still unfocused, still swimming, but present. Nolan shone a penlight briefly across her pupils. Sluggish, but responsive. He counted her breaths, timing the shallow rise of her chest, noting the sharp hitch every time her ribs protested. He wrapped a compression bandage around her midsection, firm enough to stabilize but loose enough to let her breathe. When she hissed in pain, he paused, waited until the wave passed. "Rib contusion," he murmured to himself. "Maybe a hairline crack?" He positioned her upright against a stack of folded blankets rather than laying her flat, keeping pressure off her lungs and helping her stay conscious. Every movement was deliberate. This wasn't a hospital. This was containment, keeping her alive until the world outside loosened its grip. Bear lay a few feet away, his body angled toward the door, ears flicking at every sound the wind carried. His dark eyes never left the room for long. Minutes passed, then more. Clara's shivering slowed, her breathing steadied. Color crept back into her cheeks, uneven and blotched, but real. She swallowed, voice hoarse when she spoke. "You didn't call it in." "I tried," Nolan replied. "Storm's closing the airspace. Ground rescue won't reach us before nightfall." Her jaw tightened. "They'll come anyway." Nolan looked at her. "Who?" She took a careful breath, wincing as pain flared. "The one who did this." Nolan waited. He had learned long ago that silence pulled more truth from people than questions. "They didn't want me off the road," Clara said slowly. "They wanted me gone." The words came easier now, anger sharpening them. "I was tracking irregularities," she continued. "Small things at first, fuel logs that didn't line up, patrol vehicles rerouted off mountain for no reason. It didn't make sense until it did." Nolan stayed quiet, adjusting the kettle on the stove to keep it warm, not boiling. "They're using the patrol routes," Clara said. "The mountain roads, no cameras, no traffic. You move weapons through those passes. Nobody checks. Nobody suspects." She laughed once, short and bitter. "Nobody expects a cop car to be dirty." Nolan turned back toward her. "Who's in charge?" Her eyes hardened. "The sheriff." She said the word like it tasted wrong. "He's been in that seat for 15 years, she went on. "Good reputation, community hero, knows everyone, trains every deputy himself." Her hands curled in the blanket. "I thought he was my mentor." Nolan felt the weight of it settle into place. This wasn't a rogue officer or a bad decision made in panic. This was structure, planning, protection. "He knew I was on to something," Clara said. "I didn't confront him. I wasn't stupid. I was gathering proof, quietly." Her gaze drifted toward the ceiling beams, memories pulling her away. "He called me last night, said there was a report of a disabled vehicle near the pass, told me to take the shortcut, said it would save time before the weather turned." She closed her eyes. There was no disabled vehicle. Nolan said nothing. "When I realized the road was wrong, it was too late," she continued. "I tried to turn around. He was already behind me. One hard hit, enough to send me over." She opened her eyes again, fixing them on Nolan. "They'll come back." "Why?" Nolan asked. "To make sure I didn't crawl out," she said. and to clean it up. Burned car, frozen body, mountain accident. The stove popped softly. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying a low moan through the trees. Nolan stood and crossed the room, pulling a battered metal case from beneath a shelf. He opened it, checking the contents by habit. Medical supplies, spare batteries, a folded map worn thin along its creases. He set it aside and moved to the far wall, where an old cabinet stood bolted into the timber. Inside were pieces of a life he no longer lived. A compact satellite radio, its casing scratched but intact, a military-grade handset wrapped in oilcloth. Nolan lifted them one at a time, testing weight, familiarity. The equipment was old, but not obsolete. Reliable. Quiet. He didn't turn them on. Not yet. Instead, he pulled the map free and spread it across the table. His finger traced the mountain roads, the patrol routes, the narrow passes where weather and isolation did the work of walls. He marked times in his head when the crash would have been noticed, how long it would take for someone to officially start looking, how long before someone decided not to wait. Bear rose suddenly, a low rumble vibrating through his chest. Nolan looked up. The dog's nose lifted, drawing in the air near the door, his ears angling toward the forest. He took a slow step forward, then stopped, listening. "Something out there?" Nolan asked quietly. Bear didn't bark. He didn't move. His tail stilled. "Human scent," Nolan murmured. "Not close. Not yet." Clara watched them, her face tightening. "They're faster than I thought." "Or careful," Nolan said. He folded the map and set it aside. "You did the right thing," he told her, not confronting him, not running. She gave a humorless smile. "Doesn't feel like it." "It will," he said, "if you stay alive." She nodded once, the motion small but resolute. Nolan sat back in the chair opposite her, his posture finally easing, though his attention never drifted far from the door or the radio on the table. "This isn't local anymore," he said. "If the sheriff's involved, the department's compromised. Calling the wrong person could get you killed." Clara's eyes searched his. "Then what do we do?" Nolan looked at the equipment again, at the map, at Bear standing watch like a living sentry. "We wait," he said. "We document. We keep you breathing." The wind rose outside, pressing against the cabin as if testing it. And somewhere in the mountains, someone was already deciding when to come back. The storm tightened its grip as night fell. Snow no longer drifted. It drove. Thick sheets of white slammed into the trees, erasing depth and distance, swallowing sound until the world beyond the cabin ceased to exist. The wind pressed against the walls with a steady, testing force, as if searching for weakness. The cabin did not answer. It stood, low and unmarked, exactly where it was never meant to be found. Inside, the air was warm but tense. Clara lay propped on the cot near the stove, wrapped in layers of wool and canvas. Her breathing was steadier now, though shallow, each rise of her chest still measured and deliberate. Nolan checked her pupils again, then her pulse, before stepping back and giving her space. He had learned when presence helped, and when silence did more. "Whatever you're carrying," he said finally, "it wasn't in the car." Clara swallowed. Her throat was dry, but her eyes were clear. "No," she said, "I never transport evidence on me. Too obvious." She paused, gathering strength. "It's a micro-storage card, smaller than a fingernail." Nolan's gaze sharpened. "I hid it weeks ago," she continued, "before I even knew how deep it went. I needed something no one would search for." "Where?" he asked. "In a collar," Clara said. "An old K9 collar, not active duty, from my first dog." Her voice softened for half a second. "His name was Ash, retired last winter." Nolan waited. "I stitched a hidden seam into the lining," she went on. "Buried the card inside. Then I buried the collar." "Where?" Near an abandoned patrol outpost, she said. 3 miles east of the upper ridge, off the marked trail. Nobody goes there anymore. Nolan turned this over in his mind. Evidence small enough to disappear, hidden in something no one would think to destroy, left in a place forgotten by time and weather. Smart. Why not retrieve it earlier? He asked. Clara exhaled slowly. Because I knew the moment I moved it, I'd leave a trace, tracks, cameras, questions. She met his eyes. And now? Now, Nolan said, we don't rush. He moved to the window, peering out into the blinding white. Visibility was nothing. Even Bear, standing beside him, could see no more than a few feet beyond the glass. We go out there now, Nolan continued. We paint a map in the snow. Whoever's hunting you won't need technology to follow it. Clara nodded. She understood. Nolan pulled a chair closer to her cot and sat, resting his forearms on his knees. His voice lowered, not gentle, but controlled. Listen carefully, he said. What I'm about to say isn't training, it's orientation. Her brow furrowed. Orientation? For being hunted? He didn't ask if she was ready. When people look for someone to arrest, Nolan said, they look for behavior, movement, mistakes. They assume you'll act like a cop. He watched her reaction. She didn't look away. When people look for someone to kill, he continued, they look for silence, absence, anything that doesn't belong. He tapped the map folded on the table. You don't move unless you have to. You don't speak unless silence becomes more dangerous than noise. You memorize paths you never intend to walk. Clara shifted slightly, pain flashing across her face. Nolan raised a hand, stopping her. You don't practice this physically, he said. Your body's not the weapon right now. Your mind is. He began walking her through it, slow and methodical. If they come to the cabin, he said, you don't announce yourself. You don't hide where someone expects fear. You hide where someone assumes emptiness. Her breathing slowed as she listened. You give up the idea of pursuit, Nolan added. No chasing, no confronting. You survive long enough for truth to matter. Clara closed her eyes briefly, absorbing it. I've spent my whole career running toward danger, she said quietly. And now, Nolan replied, you run past it. Bear shifted near the door, nose lifting. A faint growl rolled through his chest, then stopped. Nolan's head snapped up. What is it? Clara asked. Echo, Nolan said. Not movement, just sound carrying wrong. The dog moved a step, sniffed again, then settled. But he did not relax. They're not here yet, Nolan said, but someone's checking routes. Clara's jaw tightened. He's narrowing the circle. Yes, Nolan said, and that means time matters. He stood and crossed the room to the cabinet again. This time, he didn't hesitate. The satellite radio came out, followed by the handset. Nolan checked the battery, the antenna, then turned slightly away from Clara, not to hide, but to focus. His posture changed. The man who lived quietly in the woods slipped back, replaced by something sharper, more exact. This call can't be undone, he said over his shoulder. Once I make it, things move. Clara opened her eyes. Do it. Nolan keyed in a sequence not listed anywhere. Old encryption, military legacy channels that still listened for the right voice. The radio hissed, static, then a tone. This is Cross, Nolan said. Former Naval Special Warfare. I'm reporting a live witness in a corruption case involving armed smuggling through mountain patrol routes. Silence stretched, then a calm, measured voice answered. State your location and status. I won't give coordinates over open air, Nolan replied. But I can confirm witness is injured, stable. Evidence exists. Suspect is a county-level law enforcement commander with resources. Another pause. Then, you're aware this escalates federal jurisdiction. Yes, Nolan said. That's why I'm calling you. The voice changed, firmer now. "Hold position. Protect the witness. We're placing a federal response team on standby." "Weather prevents approach," Nolan said. "We know," the voice answered. "That buys us preparation time." Nolan exhaled slowly. Understood. The channel closed. He stood there for a moment, radio still in his hand. When he turned back, Clara was watching him. Fear there, yes, but also something steadier. Resolve. "They're coming," she said. "Yes," Nolan replied, "but not blind." Outside, the storm howled louder, burying tracks that had never been made. And somewhere beneath the snow, a small collar waited. Silent, patient, holding the truth. The first sound wasn't an engine. It was the quiet breaking of quiet. Snow compressed by weight, a cadence just off from the wind's rhythm. Bear caught it before Nolan did, head lifting, ears angling toward the tree line. His breath fogged once, slow and controlled. Nolan set the mug down without a clink. He didn't reach for a weapon. Not yet. The figures appeared in the trees as shapes first, then men. 4 of them, moving in a staggered line that suggested training without announcing it. They wore winter parkas dusted white, reflective strips dulled with tape. 2 carried radios. 1 had a rifle slung low, the muzzle kept deliberately out of sight. Search and rescue, if you didn't know better. Nolan stepped onto the porch, boots planted wide, posture loose, the body language of a mountain man irritated by intrusion. He raised a hand, palm out, as if to ward off conversation rather than invite it. "Road's closed," he called. "Weather'll kill you before I do." The man in front stopped at the edge of the clearing. He was tall, broad-shouldered, beard rimed with frost, eyes too alert for someone here to help. He smiled without warmth. "We're looking for a deputy," the man said. "Vehicle went off-road last night. We're checking cabins." Nolan tilted his head, squinting like the glare bothered him. "Didn't hear anything? Didn't see anyone?" The second man shifted, boots crunching. Nolan caught the subtle movement of his right hand near his jacket seam. "Mind if we come inside?" the tall one asked. "Protocol." "No," Nolan said flatly. The smile vanished. "You don't have a warrant," Nolan continued. "You don't have jurisdiction. You keep standing on my land. You're trespassing." The tall man took a step closer. "This isn't a request." Nolan felt the recorder in his pocket vibrate once, still running. "That's a threat," Nolan said calmly. "Say it again." The rifle came up. Nolan moved. He turned sharply, shouting a single word over his shoulder. Not loud, but precise. Bear launched from the doorway like a shadow breaking loose, teeth flashing white against the snow. The first gunshot cracked the air. Nolan didn't hear the second. He grabbed the porch post and swung, using the cabin's corner to break the line of fire. The bullet tore through the wood where his head had been a breath earlier. Splinters exploded outward. Bear hit the rifleman low, driving into his legs, jaws locking around a forearm before the man could react. The weapon skidded across the porch, spinning into the snow. Nolan vaulted the railing, landing hard, pain blooming sharp and sudden in his shoulder as something hot ripped through flesh. He didn't slow. He couldn't. Another man lunged from the side, too close for a clean shot. Nolan drove his weight forward, using momentum and ice, slamming the man into the cabin wall. Bone met timber with a dull crack. The man went down, stunned. The third attacker fired wild, rounds chewing the air, tearing bark from a nearby pine. Nolan rolled, came up behind the woodpile, breath ragged, vision tunneling. He pressed a hand to his shoulder and felt warmth soak through his sleeve. Not deep. He could still move it. Bear snarled, a sound raw with fury and pain. Nolan glimpsed him dragging himself backward, blood staining the snow beneath his rear leg, but his grip never loosened. The rifleman screamed once before Bear released and repositioned, placing himself between the porch and the clearing. The fourth man ran. Nolan took 3 steps, slid, caught himself, and tackled him from behind. They hit the ground hard. The man fought dirty, elbows, fingers clawing for eyes. Nolan answered with efficiency, not anger, until resistance stopped. When it was over, the wind rushed back in to claim the sound. Nolan knelt in the snow, chest heaving, vision pulsing at the edges. He forced himself to stand, one breath at a time, scanning. 4 men, all down, all breathing. Bear limped to his side, fur matted red at the haunch. His eyes were fierce, unblinking. "You did good," Nolan said, voice hoarse. He moved fast after that, binding wrists with cord, securing weapons, dragging bodies out of the open. He worked through pain, through the tremor in his hands, through the old voice in his head that whispered about last times and losses. He ignored it. Clara's world was sound and darkness. The snow muffled everything until each gunshot felt like it came from inside her chest. She pressed her hands to her ears, counting breaths, forcing herself to stay still. Nolan's words echoed in her head. "Don't move unless silence becomes more dangerous than noise." The fighting stopped. Time stretched. She waited. Above ground, Nolan keyed the satellite handset with fingers slick with blood. "Cross to Federal Command," he said. "Armed contact confirmed. Suspects detained. Both K-9 and operator wounded. Weather still closed. Request immediate response when window opens." The reply came clipped and steady. "Received. Hold position. Assets mobilizing." Nolan ended the transmission and sagged against the cabin wall, sliding down until he sat in the snow. He looked at Bear, who eased himself down beside him with a grunt. "No one's missing," Nolan whispered. "We're still here." The storm surged, trying to erase what had happened. It didn't succeed. Morning came quietly. Not with sunlight at first, but with absence. The wind loosening its grip, the snow falling straight instead of sideways. The storm pulled back just enough to breathe. Clouds thinned into pale gray sheets, and the jagged spine of the Sawtooth Range re-emerged, sharp and watchful under a cold blue sky. Nolan woke sitting upright against the cabin wall, his shoulder burning in a deep, steady way that told him the bleeding had stopped, but the damage remained. He flexed his fingers slowly. They answered. Bear lay nearby, wrapped in a makeshift splint and blanket, his breathing slow and even. His eyes opened when Nolan shifted, tail giving a single, weak thump against the floor. "Still with me," Nolan murmured. Bear's ears flicked. He always was. Outside, a new sound threaded through the quiet, low, distant, mechanical. Nolan stilled, listening. The rhythm was unmistakable. Rotors. He pushed himself to his feet, wincing, and opened the door. Cold air flooded in, clean and sharp. Above the tree line, a dark shape cut through the thinning cloud cover, growing larger with every second. A Federal helicopter swept over the ridge, banking wide before settling into the clearing beyond the cabin. Snow blasted outward in a controlled storm as it descended. Moments later, snowmobiles followed. Black, heavy, purposeful, carrying men and women who moved with trained efficiency the moment their boots hit the ground. They didn't shout. They didn't rush. They secured. The first agent to approach Nolan was a woman in her early 40s, tall and straight-backed, her dark hair pulled into a tight braid beneath a helmet. Her eyes were sharp, assessing everything at once. The cabin, the blood in the snow, the restrained men bound near the tree line. "I'm Special Agent Marroquin," she said, voice calm, authoritative. "Federal Task Force." Nolan nodded once. "Cross." She glanced at his shoulder. "You need medical attention." "After," Nolan said. "Witness first." Mara studied him for half a second longer, then nodded. "Understood." Agents moved past them, weapons low but ready, securing the prisoners one by one. The men who had come so confident now avoided eye contact, faces gray with cold and realization. Their radios were confiscated, their false insignia stripped away. Clara emerged from the cabin doorway with help from a medic, her movements stiff but controlled. Her face was pale, bruises stark against her skin, but her eyes were steady. When she saw the agents, something in her shoulders finally loosened. "You're safe now," Mara said to her gently. "You're under federal protection." Clara nodded, swallowing. "I have evidence." Nolan didn't move as Clara explained where the micro-memory card was hidden. He listened as agents marked the location, relaying coordinates, forming a plan. Within minutes, a small team was dispatched toward the abandoned patrol outpost, moving carefully, deliberately, leaving no unnecessary trace. While they worked, medics turned their attention to Nolan and Bear. The medic assigned to Bear was a stocky man with a weathered face and kind eyes, moving with the practiced ease of someone who trusted animals as much as people. He spoke softly as he cleaned the wound on Bear's hind leg, hands steady, respectful. "Lucky?" the medic said. "Missed the artery. He's tough." Nolan let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Bear huffed faintly, leaning into Nolan's leg as if to confirm the assessment himself. By the time the retrieval team returned, the sun had climbed higher, casting long, pale shadows across the snow. The microcard lay in a clear evidence bag, impossibly small for the weight it carried. Mara examined it briefly, then sealed it, passing it off to another agent. "That's enough," she said. "More than enough." What followed moved quickly, yet felt distant. Radio calls, confirmations, names spoken with new authority. Warrants activated, departments bypassed. A chain of command quietly rerouted around Rot. The men who had hunted Clara were lifted onto transport, their future narrowing to metal seats and hard questions. Clara watched them go, her jaw tight. There was no triumph in her expression, only relief and something heavier. "They won't hurt anyone else," Mara said. Clara nodded. "That's enough." Later, when the noise faded and the clearing returned to stillness, Nolan stood outside the cabin, watching the snow sparkle under the strengthening light. For the first time in years, he felt no urge to disappear back into the woods. Mara joined him, arms crossed against the cold. "Your name will be cleared," she said. "What happened before? Your unit, that mission. It's on record now. Officially." Nolan absorbed that in silence. "Doesn't change the past," he said. "No," Mara agreed, "but it closes the door." Bear was loaded gently onto a transport sled for further treatment, his eyes never leaving Nolan until the last moment. Nolan rested a hand on his head, fingers sinking into familiar fur. "I'll be right behind you," he promised. The cabin stood quiet once more, but it felt different now. Not hidden, not hunted, just standing. Clara stepped up beside Nolan, wrapped in a heavy coat borrowed from the medics. She looked at the mountains, then at the cabin, then at him. "I don't know what comes next," she said. Nolan considered the question, the morning, the open sky. "Neither do I." They stood there together as the sun climbed, light spilling across the snow in soft gold bands. No speeches, no vows, just breath in cold air, and the knowledge that the night had ended. Behind them, the Sawtooth Mountains watched in silence. Ahead, the day waited. Sometimes justice doesn't arrive with sirens or applause. Sometimes it comes quietly, through one person who refuses to look away, one choice made in the cold, and one life protected long enough for the truth to matter. In our everyday lives, we may never face a mountain storm or armed corruption, but we all encounter moments where silence feels easier than speaking, where walking away feels safer than standing firm. This story is a reminder that integrity often survives in small, unseen decisions, and that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it simply stays. If this story resonated with you, take a moment to share it with someone who might need hope today. Leave a comment below and tell us what part moved you most. Your voice matters here, and if you believe in stories of resilience, loyalty, and quiet strength, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next journey. Thank you for being part of this community.